Hey guys, it's Jeremy here. We're going to do another lap guide video. Today we are at the Circuit Zandvoort in Netherlands. The circuit was originally built in 1948. It was updated to this current configuration in 1999, and the layout changed a little bit in 2018 or 2019 to prepare it for Formula One to come through. It's a lot of fun to drive in GT3 cars. It's a lot of elevation changes. The banked corners are incredible. If you can get it hooked up through there, it's just an absolute blast. We're going to run this lap guide video the same way we did the previous ones. I'll just run the lap at speed, and then we'll break down the lap after that and point out some key moments around the lap. We were able to pull off a 132.527. It's a pretty good lap around here. The car was hooked up. I've got the brake bias dialed back to 53.1. I found that negates a lot of the understeer that this car picks up mid-corner. It really helps you rotate it with the pedals more than the steering wheel. The weather is set to the weather we're going to be having for the race session. This is just a test session based off of the race session for this weekend. Dan sets it at 69 degrees Fahrenheit for the weather, 1 mile an hour winds, and 1% humidity. So there's no wizardry or crazy nonsense going on. I didn't touch any of the power or weight adjustments. This car is stock as is. We're running the fixed setup. All I've changed is the brake bias. Without further ado, we're going to run the lap. You'll notice one last thing. My line through this final corner to start the lap is a little different than my line through the final corner to end the lap. It's kind of similar to oval racing. This banked corner at the end of the lap is beneficial to starting the lap if you give it a nice wide line on your exit and let the car really carry that speed through the corner. However, finishing your hot lap, you want to make sure that you keep the car tucked in nice and tight to the inside here. That's the last little note I got before we run it. All right, let's get it. And across the line. As you can see, we were able to pull off a 132.527. It's a pretty good lap around here. Like I said, these GT3 cars are an absolute blast to drive around Zandvoort. They take the banking and the long sweeping corners very well. The Corvette especially, just because it's so incredibly strong with corner exit. We're going to do this same way we did the other ones. I'll just break down the lap for you now and try and point out some key areas to focus on. Turn 14 around here, Arie Luyendyk balked. Shout out to Arie Luyendyk. It's an absolute legend. I grew up following the guy. And he's a really, really cool dude. But turn 14 is Arie Luyendyk balked. It's an awesome banked corner. Leads onto the front straightaway. Like I said, to start the lap, start your hot lap, if you're really just going for it for just a timed lap, you're gonna want to let the car run out here to the outside as much as you can. Same with oval racing, any kind of banked circuit. You let the car run on that high line, and you're carrying way more speed. It is slower, but you carry more speed onto the straight. as a result. And so it sets you up a lot better for your run down into turn one. I'm aiming kind of in between the 150 meter boards here. I brake just past the 100 board. More kind of on the side of caution, just because you don't really want to overshoot this braking zone. A lot of these corners, because of the banking, they're similar to the carousel corners at the Nürburgring. If you wash out of that banking and find yourself on that high line, it costs you so much time through the corner. And so it's better to kind of err on the side of caution and brake a little earlier, lift a little bit before the braking zone, and make sure you can get the car slowed down. You'll be able to make up that speed mid-corner and on-corner exit if you can get your entry right. But it's almost impossible to get that time back if you overcook your entrance. And so we're getting the car slowed down in a straight line, down to fifth, fourth, into third. We're taking second through this corner. I'm looking for a white bit of curbing here on the end. This little bit on the tip of the curb is usually my aiming point to set up my exit. And you can see that we're pretty much off the brakes here. I'm using it just kind of to modulate my line and that sweep through the corner. And then right back on as soon as I can see that my exit is good. There was a little hesitation lift there just because this thing is so lively at the rear. I can't really trust it, but once once you can tell the car is hooked up, a lot of these corners have a pretty aggressive exit. Coming into turn 2, we keep the car over to the left-hand side. Just a little dab of brakes to get the weight onto the front end. You can kind of chop this curb. You don't want to chop too much of it, because if you get too much of this grass underneath the car, it'll unsettle you and upset your entrance into turn 3. Turn 3 is really important just because it's such an aggressively banked corner that if you can't get the line right, it's going to compromise the whole section that follows. So it's important to kind of sacrifice turn 2 and use it more of just a setup corner for turn 3 here. And get the car over to the right hand side. Onto the brakes, but mainly just to get it back onto the front end, just because the way the road goes kind of down and then up and then back down into turn 3, it unsettles the front end because there's so much suspension load, and then unload and then load again. So I found that getting back on the brakes just a little bit helps keep that nose sucked down, and avoids it bouncing and hopping too much, and it keeps ABS from running this corner. You don't want to wash up too high, but you do want to keep the car up in this groove on the high side through the banking here. If you run up too high, it gets really slippery. Not only are there a shit ton of marbles up here, but there's dust and everything else, and it just sends you up into this barrier. It's not a fun accident just because the banking is so aggressive that the car will usually hop up into the air and then land super funny. It's usually a trip to the pits. You can see I'm on the throttle really early through this corner. As soon as I can tell that we're getting like that good grip, we're going back to full throttle basically here. And you can see we're nowhere near the exit of the corner. The like safer barrier hasn't even ended yet, and we're committing to full throttle. You can ride the banking all the way through the exit here. Up into third, I'm already grabbing gears. You can use the majority of this curbing. You don't want to run out too wide, because if you get up onto the grass here, it gets really bumpy and it'll unsettle the car and upset your exit. It just compromises how much speed you're actually able to put down to the road. Or how much power you're able to put down to the road and how much speed you're getting from it, rather. This is a pretty straightforward section, kind of similar to the uphill section at Watkins Glen. You want to just let the car flow, path of least resistance. You try and draw the straightest line you can through these sweeping corners. And then this section's interesting. The car is screaming at me to upshift, but because I know that there's a downhill braking zone coming up, I'm just going to keep it in fifth and ride that gear out until it reaches the heavens. I get a little bit of braking done here on, I call it the flatland, but you can see we're already kind of starting the downhill. It's not the aggressive part of the downhill yet, and so I try and get the car slowed down before we're pushing downhill as much as we're going to be later in this corner. I'd also, because I run the brake bias so far back, if I brake any later than this area, it really unsettles the car and it becomes more of a drift corner than a grip acceleration corner. It's not a hard brake application. I get up to about 80%, but then I'm right back off of them. It's mainly just to make sure I've got that weight on the front tires and I can feel the grip through the steering wheel to get the car turned in. I'm already right back off the brakes and we're already back on the throttle. We haven't even entered the corner fully yet, in my eyes. And now we're back at full throttle. It's one of these corners where you feel, like you just have to kind of feel the car through the front end. There is a little bit of banking. It looks off camber through here, but because of the way the exit is set up, it does funnel you through pretty well. You just kind of guide the car around. And you can use a decent amount of this curbing here, again, avoiding the gravel. It's just going to slow you down. The gravel around here isn't lethal, but it will cost you tenths here and there, and they always add up. You can kind of hop over this grass. I usually mount this curb, just trying to set up a nice straight braking zone for this right-hander going into turn 9. Yeah, we're back at turn 9. Onto the brakes, but not fully. Just another kind of jab to get the weight onto the front end, and then we're trailing through the corner. You want to kind of miss this curb. If you hit it, depending on the car you're in, it usually unsettles the car and it'll push you too far wide. This is an interesting corner coming up after, oh sorry, that was turn 8. Going into turn 8, this is an interesting run into turn 9 just because it's so sweeping. You don't get a straight braking zone for turn 9. So you run the car out wide here to the left. You can use pretty much all of this curb, but I've found if you run all the way out onto it, it doesn't provide as much traction as the road, and therefore you're not going to get as much acceleration off of it coming through the corner. And because your front wheels are going to be sliding just that slight bit more on the rumble strip here, I try and just keep it on the asphalt if I can. Sometimes I carry too much speed through turn 8 and it's unavoidable, but ideally you want to keep the car on the tarmac through here. Onto the brakes. This is one of those kind of trail brake corners where you're braking as you're turning the car in. The road does not provide you with a section to set it up for a straight entry. The only way you really you can turn in here and commit to a straight braking zone, but then it sort of compromises how you're going to round off the corner. Or you can try and run wider, but again, it compromises your turn in. There isn't really a way to go about this corner other than guiding it in nice and easy while you're on the brakes. You don't want to get on the brakes too hard because obviously you're turning the car, and so if you get on the brakes too much, it's just going to cause that over rotation and you're going to spin, or you're going to get ABS engaged on the front end and just get a mountain of understeer. ABS a little bit, so we're already off the brakes and just kind of rotating the car through. You can mount this curb on the inside a little bit if you want to, but the goal is nice, smooth throttle application so that you're not spinning up the tires or spinning the car itself on corner exit. And then you want to work all the way back over to the right-hand side here, and then almost immediately back onto the brakes. This is another one of those kind of sweeping trail braking sections. It's a U-shaped corner into another U-shaped corner. And so we go through turn 9 into turn 10. Coming out of turn 10, you can use a decent amount of this curbing on the runoff here, but you want to avoid the gravel, mainly just because of the bumps. It unsettles the exit, and it just costs you those hundredths that turn into tenths, that turn into more than tenths by the time you get to these short little straights. It's a little shoot down here into the turn 11, turn 12 complex. I get on the brakes, again, right in between the 100 and the 50 meter board. Deliberate braking, but we're not killing it. It's mainly, our goal is to get it slowed down for this section of the corner, just because as soon as we pass this curb, the next goal is to get the car slowed down just a tiny bit and turned left. So if we haven't gotten our braking done here, it isn't going to happen in this section of road. This little section that you can see on screen here, that's about all you get to set the car up for the left-hander that follows this right. And so you want to get the majority of your braking done here. It's another banked left-hander following this right-hand corner. And so if you carry too much speed through here, you're going to wash out of that banked corner, and it compromises not only the exit of this corner, but that bit of speed that you get on the short straight leading up to turns 13 and 14, which are kind of crucial to start the lap. And so I usually sacrifice turn 11 here, get a lot of braking done down into second gear. I avoid this inside curb. I don't necessarily like dodge it, but I'm not looking to attack it really, just because it's unsettled the Corvette in the past, and so I don't trust it. And because, like I said, this left-hander is so critical, mainly just looking to set up this left-hander using that right-hand corner. And so we're getting the car as far to the right as we can coming through that turn. And as soon as I can tell I'm like on that right angle of the ridge coming down, we're working it right back to the left, hard left, a little bit on the brakes, mainly just to make sure I can feel the grip in the front end and that I've got the weight where I want it on the car. And then we're just kind of patient. I'm on the throttle, but we're not fully on the throttle. It's more to just kind of coax the car around the corner, and to keep my angle where I want it through this corner. Once we can see the exit and we can tell we're going to make it, we're full throttle and committed, and we open up the steering a little bit just to keep that rotation from killing us. And then we're setting up turn 13. Over to the left-hand side of the road, just before the 50-meter board. Sorry, just after the 50-meter board. I'm on the brakes. Not really fully. Just a bit of brakes to get the weight onto the front end and get it turned in. And as soon as I can tell that the car is going to grip the rest of the way through the corner, we're fully back on throttle. You can use a decent amount of this runoff here. You can see I've got a wheel fully over the curb onto the gravel. It isn't the end of the world. It's not ideal. I didn't want to do that. In a perfect world, I would have kept it a little bit further to the inside, and that might have saved me another 10th on this lap. But at the end of the day, a 10th isn't going to kill you, especially with this long straight. If you're close enough to the car in front, you're just going to get that back in the draft. However, if the car behind you is in a draft, you are going to be losing a 10th plus what you're losing in the draft. So it's something to consider. You want to make sure that your turn 13 exit is nice and crisp, because as soon as you commit to being flat out of turn 13, you do not lift until you're braking for turn 1. Back into the RE line Dijkbocht. You'll see that this line is different than the start of the lap. I keep it nice and low, and we're tucked in here along the white line, flat out, letting the car run its way through the gears. Not too much steering input, but just enough to keep it on that low line where I want it. And then you ride kind of the inside ridge of this hump right here. You can see it's pretty obvious where it's a larger bit of hump on the left-hand side than the right. It's more of a gradual kind of gradient down this way. And so I keep the car to the right. You do get some more speed on that push on the downhill, but you don't get the time you lost back from running that far out in this corner. And so to start the lap, it's not the worst move, but to end the lap, you want to keep the car towards the inside of the track. And then we're flat out back down the straightaway and across the line. As you can see, we did a 132.527. It's a fixed setup. We're running the Chevrolet Corvette Z06 GT3R. Hopefully this lap guide's able to give you guys some time around this track. It's an interesting one. GT3 cars don't normally come here. It's typically an open wheel circuit, but it is a lot of fun to drive in these things. Look forward to seeing you guys this weekend. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.